Manchester United have lost 48% of their games this season. 48%. And you know what's even more concerning than that? In the Premier League, they have only scored 22 goals. 22. You know who that's even less than? Luton Town. Luton Town have scored more goals than the behemoth of a club that is Manchester United, that has spent hundreds of millions of pounds into their attacking line, and they have scored more goals than Manchester United. Luton Town, the same team that was newly promoted, lost all of their best players, and has Ross Barkley steering the ship, have scored more goals than Manchester United. So it begs the question, is it time to get rid of the man steering the ship, which is obviously Erik Ten Hag? Is it time to get rid of him? Well, let's start with the problems at Manchester United. There's the obvious problems that have to deal with the Glazers and the management of the club, but let's forget that for a second and let's focus on Erik Ten Hag and what he can control and why people are starting to look at him and starting to doubt him once again. And well, the obvious things on the pitch, Manchester United don't have a style of play and they look absolutely lost. They look like they don't have an identity. They don't have a passport right now. And two, they can't score goals. Despite the fact that they probably spent 400 to 500, 600 million pounds or whatever it is on their attacking line, they can't score goals. As I said, they've scored less goals than Luton Town. They are in the bottom 4 of the Premier League in terms of goals scored. That is a huge problem. Obviously, considering how much they spent and all of that, it is a huge and colossal problem. And that's probably where you need to start with Manchester United in terms of the footballing aspect. But lastly, I think one of the major problems with Erik Ten Hag, and the thing that people really question about him, is his ability to manage his players. Because there's reports coming out almost every other week that a player is unhappy, he's lost the dressing room or something like that. There's obviously been a countless number of situations where he's just fallen out with a player and he hasn't been able to reprehend it, or he hasn't been able to, fix it and get them back playing. Maybe that's the player's fault, or maybe that's Erik Ten Hag's fault. Who knows? We don't know right now. We're not obviously behind the scenes. But I think to really evaluate whether Erik Ten Hag should be out of the door for Manchester United, we need to start where he started. Because it seemed as though that Erik Ten Hag and Manchester United, and in his first half of his tenure, it looked like they were on the right direction. He had that calamitous first 3 games where he lost to Brighton, Brentford, and someone else, I can't quite remember, but he lost 3 straight. It was looking absolutely terrible, but then he steered the ship around, and then in the end he got them to win a trophy. They won the Carabao Cup. And that stat that I gave you at the beginning, that they lost 48% of their games this season, that doesn't really mean much. When you don't put it in a context, it doesn't really mean much. It just sounds really, really bad, but it isn't that bad. You can take it with a grain of salt. But if you really put that stat into perspective, then you start to understand why it is so bad. Because before winning the Carabao Cup, so before that time against Newcastle when they won the Carabao Cup, before that, and at the start of Erik Ten Hag's tenure, he'd only lost 15% of his games. And I know obviously, there's probably been more games here or less games before that Carabao Cup win, but still, that is a huge difference. Going from 15% to almost 50%. That's inexcusable for Manchester United. Going that far down, considering that, as I said, they were on the right direction. It looked like they'd turned the corner. It looked like they'd finally found their guy in Erik Ten Hag. The squad were finally looking together. They were playing great football. And then when you thought about the prospect of going into the summer, bringing in new players and fortifying that squad, it just looked like they were going to continue to build. And it looked like Erik Ten Hag was going to start to turn Manchester United into a successful club again in terms of a footballing aspect. But that, as we know, obviously isn't what happened. They shit the bed, and again, they find themselves in the same position that they found themselves in the past decade or so. This terrible position where they're, 5th or 6th. Doesn't seem that bad in the grand scheme of things, but when you consider that they are Manchester United, possibly the most famous club in the world, it is bad. It is absolutely terrible for Manchester United to still be in this position. So again, we find ourselves asking what needs to change. So taking into account the problems that I stated, that, they can't score goals, they don't have identity of play, Erik Ten Hag has a problem with managing plays, you'd probably think that I think that Manchester United need to look somewhere else. They need to bring in a different guy. There's no point in continuing to ride this storm out. But it's not as simple as it seems, because I'll leave you with one question. If you were to fire Erik Ten Hag right now, January 11th, halfway through the Premier League season, the question is, who the hell do you bring in? Who do you bring in? Because Erik Ten Hag has probably signed 6 or 7 of these players that are playing right now in his current 11. He's had them for about a season and a half. These are his players. This is his current squad. This is his team. Who do you bring in that can drastically change this and make this a better situation than it currently is? I don't know if you can bring anybody in right now that would drastically, and I mean drastically, change the situation. Because with currently under Erik Ten Hag, Manchester United will probably finish about 6th or 7th. They probably won't win a trophy, but that's it. Manchester United will finish there under, behind all their rivals, because that's what you're looking at right now. If Manchester United continue with Ten Hag, they're gonna finish 6th or 7th under all their rivals. That's just where Manchester United will be. If you bring in a different guy, it isn't going to drastically change that. They aren't going to suddenly propel themselves into a top 4 spot. Because if you think about it, a new manager coming in is probably, let's say, going to need 2 to 3 weeks to start to implement his play style, think about what players he wants in the team, etc., etc. And 2 to 3 weeks at this time of the season just derails your whole season. You're going to lose a couple of games, and just like that, you're behind the pack, and you're probably going to finish in the same position that you were with Ten Hag. So what's the point of bringing in a new manager? If you look at the pros and the cons, they almost equal themselves out. And to be honest, I think you do have to ride it out with Ten Hag. And no matter how much the Manchester United fan base has turned against Ten Hag, there's obviously the minority that want to continue with him. No matter how much they've turned against him, you're going to have to stick with him. You're going to have to stick with what you got, and you're going to have to ride the storm out. And that's probably what the, management of Manchester United are probably thinking as well. The footballing directors or whatever, even though they probably haven't had footballing directors in about a decade, those people are probably thinking the same thing. We have to stick with Erik Ten Hag. Maybe, perchance, he could figure something out, because at the end of the day, he's the one who spent 400 to 500 million pounds and brought in, 5 to 6 new players. He has brought in reinforcement, and he has had his fingerprints on this squad. So maybe there is a chance, with injuries coming back and relying on a 18-year-old that is fresh out the Carrington Academy instead of the players that you bought, maybe there's a chance. Maybe he could turn it around, and maybe Manchester United can propel themselves into a better position that they are. But bringing in a new manager won't really change things. But it's not just that. I think the field or the manager position is very, very thin right now in world football. I just think all the top managers are in positions. They have jobs, they're at teams, and they're doing quite well. So if you're Manchester United, you either have to pluck someone out of a current job or look towards an Antonio Conte or a Zinedine Zidane. And so I don't think Manchester United have many very great options if they want to bring in a new manager. Antonio Conte, I don't think is fit to manage Manchester United. We saw the calamity and the horrendous job that he did at Tottenham Hotspur. Although it was great for the first 6 or 7 months, and he bought them a Champions League spot. It just went down like a lead balloon. He was a crybaby. He cried about it. He threw his toys out of the pram, and he got himself out of there. Right? So you can't bring in Antonio Conte again, because I think he is the exact opposite thing that you want at Manchester United. Because if he said that about Tottenham, imagine what the hell he would say about the possibly even more mismanaged Manchester United. It'd probably be a hell of a lot worse. So I don't think you can look towards Antonio Conte. So what options are you left with? You stick with Ten Hag. And so, after all of that, after, shitting on Manchester United and shitting on Erik Ten Hag, I have to say, at the end of the day, you have to stick with Erik Ten Hag. I know it's crazy, and it sounds stupid, and it doesn't sound like the thing that should be done. You should, at the end of the day, stick with Erik Ten Hag, because there are no better options. You are in a lose-lose situation if you are Manchester United. So look, Erik Ten Hag, I don't think he should leave. And I don't think Manchester United should sack Erik Ten Hag, because they're in a lose-lose situation. They can't bring in a new manager that will do them any better. And then Erik Ten Hag, you have to ride it out.